Before we dive into how the US became the world's leading jailer, subscribe to Silent Archive for more dark history. Today, we're looking at the white stuff. How did the exact same drug create two completely different worlds? One got you a promotion at a law firm, the other got you 20 years in a cage. This isn't just about drugs, it's about a calculated war on specific zip codes. Welcome to Incarceration Nation. To understand this betrayal, we have to go back to when cocaine was actually respectable. In the late 19th century, it wasn't a crime. It was a miracle cure. It was the it girl of medicine, sold in catalogs alongside household goods. But the moment the demographics of users shifted, so did the law. This is where the blueprint for our modern prison system was first drawn. In the 1890s, you could order it like you're on Amazon. It was in your cough drops, your hemorrhoid cream, and yes, the original Coca-Cola. People weren't fact-checking. They were just having a great, highly energized time. But the vibe shifted the moment the wrong people started using it. By 1914, the media began planting seeds of racial terror. In 1914, the New York Times published a headline that changed everything. Negro cocaine fiends are a new Southern menace. They claimed the drug made black men immune to bullets. It was pure fantasy, but it worked. It created a racial hysteria that led to the first major crackdown. It was the first time we saw a drug associated with a menace to justify incarceration. This was the blueprint. Scare the public, associate a group with a drug, and then use the law to lock them away. History was about to repeat itself in high definition as we moved into the disco era. In the 70s, cocaine was back, and she was fancy. It was the drug of rock stars and Wall Street, seen as a luxury accessory, not a crime. Even the Blues Brothers movie had a cocaine budget. But while the elites were partying, the supply chain was changing. The Ready Rock arrived. We're talking about Freeway Rick Ross, the man who moved $3 million worth of product every single day. He didn't invent crack, but he made it a household name. And he had a pipeline that went much deeper than just the streets of South Central. It reached all the way back to the Cold War. While Hollywood celebrated the high life, a darker alliance was forming. Journalist Gary Webb would later expose how cocaine profits were used to fund CIA-backed rebels in Nicaragua. This dark alliance flooded inner cities with cheap cocaine, creating the very crisis that politicians would soon use to launch a new, more aggressive phase of the war on drugs. Enter Richard Nixon. Nixon needed a way to disrupt his enemies, the anti-war left and black people. His own advisor admitted it. They couldn't make it illegal to be black or a hippie, so they associated those groups with heroin and marijuana. They lied about the drugs just so they could raid homes and break up meetings. Nixon planted the seed of fear, and he used your brand new living room TV to broadcast it as public enemy number one. By the mid-'80s, the panic reached a fever pitch. In June 1986, Lenny Bias, the next Michael Jordan, died at 22. The nation was paralyzed. The media screamed that crack killed him, though it was actually powder cocaine. But the facts didn't matter anymore. The panic was out of the bottle. Congress panicked, and they didn't just write a law, they launched a legislative grenade. 2 months after Lenny's death, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 passed. It introduced the 100.1 ratio. If you had 5 grams of crack, the weight of a nickel, you got 5 years mandatory minimum. To get that same sentence with powder, you needed 500 grams. It was the same drug, but the law treated the cheaper version like a weapon of mass destruction. We were building a prison industry on a mathematical lie. This disparity wasn't accidental. It targeted urban, minority neighborhoods while giving high-level traffickers, who were often white or Latino, a pass. By 1990, drug arrests shot up by 74%. Approximately 80% of federal crack defendants were black, even though they were a small fraction of users. The results were devastating. Fathers gone, communities gutted, and a $100 billion investment in incarceration. Think about that math. 5 grams versus 500. 2 pennies worth of weight versus a brick. This wasn't justice. It was a targeted removal of a generation. And it took decades for the tide to even begin to turn. It wasn't until the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 that the ratio was finally lowered to 18.1. A compromise, but still far from equality. Today, the fight for the Equal Act continues. The Fair Sentencing Act was a landmark, but it didn't fix the past. It took the First Step Act of 2018 to finally make those reforms retroactive, allowing thousands to petition for their freedom. But the betrayal of the war on drugs remains a scar on the American landscape. We spent $100 billion not on health, but on cages, and that is the archive we must never forget. We examine the 1988 expansion, which added the death penalty for kingpins, the surge of private prisons, and the specific socioeconomic data that shows how specific zip codes were dismantled. We look at the rise of the Fair Sentencing Act, the retroactive victories of 2018, and the ongoing movement for a 1.1 ratio. This is the legacy of Incarceration Nation. Subscribe to Silent Archive for the full truth. Comment below, should we move to a 1.1 ratio? Let's discuss.